Hello, everybody. So this video will go over those problems that you have on your final practice exam or practice final, right? So you will see the practice final exam and actually its solutions already in the module called Final Exam for Math 100. But this video will just sort of talk about those problems more in detail, and I will be trying to, talk into this video as if I'm actually talking to you in person, so that I can emphasize what is important, how to solve those problems, and what those the symbols and notation actually mean. All right, so I hope this will be helpful. You don't have to watch this in its entirety. You can watch only the problem, the portion of the problem or problems that you are having some difficulty with. All right, and so I hope this will be helpful. Let's get started. Okay, so before I go to the problems, let's just make sure you know where to find the practice final. Here is the module called Final Exam, and right here is the practice final. This is where you will find the problems. I think the practice final has about 29 questions, and this is the final key. So I'm going to click on this because I will be using this very document as I try to explain the details. Okay, and so if you open this practice final ANS standing for the answer key, you will see my PDF file right here. Okay, and so it's sort of the answers are written in red, and I'll be making some more writing on this, and so that's how I will go about discussing all of these problems. Many of them are typed because it's easier for me to type sentences unless there is mathematical notation involved. All right, so let's get started with number one. All right, the first few questions have to do with logic, chapter one. I hope you remember that chapter. Okay, so the first question, what is the negation of the statement, no one is practicing social distance? And now remember, when you negate something, you have to basically negate or come up with the sentence that always has the opposite truth value. All right, regardless of if the statement is true or not. And so if no one is practicing social distance, if this statement is the original statement that you are supposed to negate, the question you should ask is, under what condition would this be false? Okay, now, in other words, what do I have to show to prove that this is wrong? If somebody claims to you, no one is practicing social distance, how would you dispute that? All right, and the answer is, you just have to find one person who is socially distancing, right? So and if you need more detailed explanation, no one is practicing. This is called a universal negative, right? This is one of the two universal quantifiers we learned. Well, one of the two types of quantifiers we learned. One is universal, the other is existential. Right. So remember, when you negate a universal statement, the negation will be an existential statement, one with an existential quantifier, like some, or there exists at least one. Okay, so the answer to this question is there is somebody who is practicing social distancing, or some are practicing social distancing. More precisely, there exists at least one person who is practicing social distancing. Okay, so the idea is to show that there is at least one person, or you can say somebody, or some people are practicing social distancing. All right, number two, I do want you to know what the inverse, converse, and the contrapositive are for a if-then statement. And by the way, these only apply to an if-then statement. So if you have a sentence like no one is practicing social distancing, there's really no inverse, converse, or contrapositive, okay? So these words only apply to a conditional statement. If you are arriving from Brazil, you cannot enter the United States. So you may want to sort of jot down the information in terms of a word or something. Basically, it's saying if you're arriving from Brazil, then you cannot enter. All right, Brazil implies can't enter. That's a simple way of saying this. Now, remember in converse, okay, what do you do in creating or stating the converse? You basically switch the order. All right. So the converse would be if you cannot enter the US, then you are arriving from Brazil. Or you could say, if you cannot enter the US, then you must be arriving from Brazil. You can change a few words somewhere around here. The inverse, on the other hand, is not to switch these, but to negate this and this. Okay, so the statement will be if you're not arriving from Brazil, then it is not true that you cannot enter. All right, so over here you will have a double negative. It is not true that you cannot enter. And therefore, when you have double negatives, they cancel each other. And so it becomes an affirmative sentence. You can enter. All right, so the inverse will be if you are not arriving from Brazil, then you can enter the United States. Okay. The contrapositive is to do both of those. All right. So you negate and you switch. And so that would be you negate and switch, right? So then it will be if you can, right? If you can enter the US, then you are not arriving from Brazil. Okay. Does it make sense? So, remember I made a chart once. P implies Q. This is the original statement. If P, then Q, right? If you switch, then you get the converse. If you negate both, you get the inverse. If you negate and switch, or switch and negate, it doesn't matter which order, then you get the contrapositive. So this is something to remember. And the question doesn't actually ask for this. No, actually it does. The second part of the question says, which one is logically equivalent to the statement? Do you remember which one is logically equivalent to the original statement that, if you arrive from Brazil, you cannot enter the US? Yeah, the only one that is logically equivalent to this is the contrapositive, okay? In other words, just imagine if this is a true statement. Let's say Brazil is having some issue like a virus or something, and if you are coming straight from Brazil, you cannot enter the US, okay? Then it would be true that if you're allowed to come to enter the US, then you cannot possibly be arriving from Brazil, because if you were, then you wouldn't be able to enter the US, right? So the contrapositive has the same meaning as the original statement. The converse and inverse actually do not have the same logical implication as the original statement. If you're arriving from Brazil, then you cannot enter. Okay, imagine this. The converse would be saying, if you cannot enter the US, then you must be arriving from Brazil. Well, it's possible that the US may have other restrictions for people from other countries. Maybe Brazil is one of those countries where you are not allowed to enter the US from. So, the converse would not have the same meaning as the original statement. If you cannot enter the US, maybe you're from other countries where the coronavirus is prevalent. Okay, the inverse is for the same reason not equivalent to the original statement, because this one would say if you are not arriving from Brazil, okay, then you can enter the US. Well, it may be not true, right? So there may be other countries from which, if you're coming from other countries, then you may not be able to come enter the US. But if you look at the contrapositive, you can see that this must be true whenever the original statement is true. Okay, number 3, you saw a really nice pair of jeans for $58.50, which was 30% off of the regular price. What was the regular price? Okay, now the most common mistake, which I would say maybe a majority of the people would make, is to calculate 35% of $58.50 and add that number to $58.50 to find the regular price. Right. So in other words, if this is your regular price, if you take 30% off, okay, this part is $58.50. That's what it's saying, right? Okay, is that right? Yeah. Do not do that. Okay, do not calculate 35% of $58.50, because this 35% is not 35% of $58.50, right? This is an extremely important point. This 35% refers to 35% of the regular price. So we're talking about the 35% of this regular price, which we do not know yet. And once you take that 35% off of the regular price, RP, then the remaining part is 58.50. All right. So let me just note my policy is, because this is such a problematic error that most people make, I am not going to give you any partial credit if you calculate 35% of 58.50. Okay, did you hear me? Right. So if you calculate 35% of 58.50, you get 0 points. If this is a point, this is a problem that's worth 5 points, you get 0 out of 5. 35% off, okay, means, remember, the entire thing is 100%. So 35% off means that you paid 65%. 100 minus 35 is 65. So you paid 65% of the regular price, and the 65% happens to be 58.50. You see that? So the point here is that this part is 65%, and that was 58.50. And the answer is, well, the procedure you would have to take is 58.50 divided by 0.65. But that's because 65% of the price P was 58.50, right? So in order to find this P, you would have to divide both sides by 0.65, which represents 65%. All right, so the answer is 58.50 divided by 0.65, and that is $90. Now you can check, you can take $90, okay? Must be a nice pair of jeans, because I wouldn't pay $90 for a pair of jeans, as my family knows. But if you get 90%, all right, if you get $90, if you take 35% of it, okay, and if you take out 35%, then you would be able to get the right answer here. Okay, in other words, what I'm saying is, if you calculate, once you get this answer here, okay, you can check your answer, right? Once you get this answer, you can calculate 35% of 90, which happens to be $31.50. Try to subtract this discount from 90, and you will get 58.50. And you can say, oh yeah, this must be the right answer. Okay. Whereas if you add 35% of 58.50 to 58.50, then you will not, things will not work out. Okay. When you try to discount that new number by 35%, you will not get 58.50. Remember, that's the tricky part of the percentages. It's called a changing basis or changing reference number. You have to know, anytime you use a percentage, you have to know what the reference number is. And in this case, the reference number was the original price, not the discounted price. Okay, number 4. If a cryptocurrency lost its value by 60%, this is also a similar problem that have to do with a changing or sliding reference number of percentages. All right, so if a cryptocurrency lost its value by 60% one day, and it's followed by 85% gain the next day, determine how much it's lost or gained during the last 2 days. Okay, so 60% loss followed by 80% gain. You do not add minus 60 plus 85 and get 25% gain. If you say that because the difference, minus 60 plus 85 is 25, if you say that you have gained 25%, this will give you 0 points. Again, if this is worth 5 points, you'll get 0 points out of 5. Just want to make sure you understand that. Okay, it sounds harsh, but that's what I'm trying to emphasize. Do not do this. Do not add these percentages if the reference number changes. Okay, what's the best way to think about this? I would start with 100%, $100 or some fixed number. Okay, if you had $100, or if the cryptocurrency in this case is worth $100, and if it lost its value by 60%, you take $60 off, and after that one day, the currency is only worth $40. Now it's going to gain 85% of not 100, but $40, right? Because that is the current worth of the cryptocurrency. And so if this gains 85%. What's 85% of 40? It's 40 times 0.85, which is 34. And $34 is the dollar gain or quantity gain um, of the value on the next day, on the following day, right? So 40 plus 34 is 74. So after 2 days, the $100 cryptocurrency is now worth $74. That's a loss of $26, right? $26 out of 100 is 26%. So instead of gaining 25% over 2 days, you actually lost 26% over the 2 days. Now, this number is not something you can just come up with at random or just write down the answer. You have to actually do some analysis like this in order to come up with this correct answer. Okay, I have to see your work on your exam to give you full credit. But as I said before, if you do negative 60 plus 85 is equal to 25% gain, you will get no credit, no partial credit.